Hello and welcome back to Automotive Tales. Join us for part 2 of the Rolls-Royce and Bentley back-to-back video. So now it's time for me to take up the reins of the Bentley and Greg is going to take up the reins of the Rolls-Royce. So here we go.
So YouTubers, we have done a car swap. Now you find me in the Rolls-Royce and I'm going to give you my initial thoughts on the Rolls-Royce. So what was interesting, so I've stepped back in time whereas Johnny's stepping forward, so it'd be interesting to see what the discussion comes out with here. But I think my conclusion is it certainly is a case between both this and the Bentley is if it ain't broke, don't fix it. You know, I've got into this and I can probably pick out half a dozen features that are exactly the same as the Bentley. You know, the switches, the door handles, some of the bits on the dashboard, and it's certainly got a very similar vibe. You know, my video that was at the end of the last video I recorded in the Bentley was very much it's a comfortable car and a car you just waft. And this hasn't got the power of the Bentley, you know, by no stretch of the imagination. I think this is about 170 brake horsepower, 200 brake horsepower, roughly thereabouts, which for a car this size and weight is not a lot, I can tell you now. But it doesn't need it. It is simply here to waft. You know, I go back to the de-stress factor that we were talking about in the Bentley. You know, here we are, we're on the A5 northbound, it is rush hour, everybody's trying to dive in up the outside edge, get into traffic, and you really don't care. It is just a case of get along, easy automatic, big lazy engine, and you just go with the flow, and it's not stressful.
We have swapped cars. I am in the Bentley Turbo R. Greg has taken up the helm of the Rolls-Royce Silver Spirit. So what do we think of this car? Well, I mean, it's certainly a more modern place to be. So this car has got a good 15 years on the Silver Spirit, and it does show. We've got some slightly more modern dial cluster components in the middle here. So we've got an LCD display that tells us what's going on with the car, tells us what gear we're in, tells us we've got the headlights on, all those sorts of usual refinements. It sounds a little bit more cushioned in here. There's a lot more sound deadening. And everything feels a bit more weighty. So where I wax lyrical about the beautiful light steering and the Bakelite large diameter steering wheel in the Rolls-Royce, this is quite a different animal. So this has got quite a, well, in comparison at least, large diameter grip on the steering wheel, smaller diameter wheel to the Rolls-Royce, and a lot more weight to the steering. And the same can be said about kind of everything really. The seats feel firmer. Not sports car firm, we're still talking about a Bentley here, but you don't sink into the seat in the same way you do in the Rolls-Royce. It feels a little bit more like I'm sat on a very comfortable sofa. But otherwise it's much the same affair, to be honest. We have a raised centre console and a 4-speed gearbox I talked about in the previous video. We've still got the same famous Rolls-Royce L410 engine up front, albeit instead of running 2 SU carburetors like the older Silver Spirit, this one has fuel injection, I believe a K-Jetronic, but I might be wrong. I'll stick something down the bottom. And instead of just shy of 200 horsepower, here we've got 355 horsepower on tap, or so the internet says. The power figures for both these vehicles are a little hard to come by. They were never very open about how much power they had. I think 355 is probably a little bit pessimistic, to be entirely honest with you. Although I think 200 for the Silver Spirit is probably a bit optimistic. But it certainly gets a bit of a shuffle on when you put your foot down. Heck, why not? Let's just see. Come on. Yeah, okay, there's the turbo properly. Yeah, okay, that's what happens when you properly press the pedal.
Now, one of the things I have to say that I have already discovered that I don't like is this seat does not adjust much. I have more headroom than the Bentley, interestingly, but the seat doesn't go back far enough for me and I feel a little cramped up at the front. But I have to say, for the age of the seat, they are comfortable, same as the Bentley, and it is quiet in here. There's space, it's quiet, it's comfortable. A few little bits, like I said, I don't like. High beam, I've discovered, is a novel little rubber switch on the floor which you cannot find if you don't know it's there. It's a bit of a pain, and for me, who has just got into this car, It's raining, I put my headlights on, and all I've done is just dazzle all the other drivers. So for now we're on side lights until I can get to somewhere and I can figure out where this switch is on the floor. The Bentley, however, obviously learned because they did put it onto the stalk. So that is a good thing. That is a good thing for the Bentley. But going back to some of the positive things, you know, for a car of this age, it's still well put together. It's still comfortable, and there's a certain thing to it. And I think it's the spirit of ecstasy on the front. You know, I'm sat here, like I say, Friday rush hour, looking at her on the bonnet. I'm not in a rush. I'm not stressed, and there is something, and it is the Rolls factor. It certainly is. So looking around, what else do I like about this car? It has physical controls for everything. And you've probably seen many of my little rants in the YouTube videos about touchscreens in modern cars, and you know how it's really faffy to go everywhere. You know, if I want to turn the temperature up, done. There. It's a split second. I don't really have to take my eyes off the road. Everything is where it needs to be. So we'll just get through this bit of traffic here. But yeah, no, it is a nice place to be, and maybe that's what's taught me about this. You know, this again is a car that wallows a bit more than the Bentley. Just relax, Mignana, just go with the flow, whatever you want to go with, and that's what I have to really say about the Rolls. Anyway, we're off to the garage. We're going to get a few more miles in on this, and I will come back to you hopefully shortly with some of my final thoughts.
Yeah, that's got some pull. Yeah. That's more than 355 brake horsepower. We appear to have left the Rolls-Royce behind somewhere. Sorry, Greg. What other things are there to note then about this car while I'm going around the twisties? Because I can't really put my foot down around here unless I want to end up in a hedge. So it's got some strange arrangement with the wipers. While it's got the same controls as the Rolls-Royce, when it's on intermittent, as it is right now, as you can probably hear in the background, it likes to stop between the intermittent cycles at the vertical position on the windscreen. And then when you turn it on to full, obviously it continues as normal, and you turn it back to off, and they park themselves back on the scuttle. I've never seen that before. The Rolls-Royce doesn't do that. Slightly unusual. But, I mean, it doesn't seem to affect the car. It's quite an interesting feature. I just don't know why on earth you would do it. Other things you get in here, you've still got the nice walnut dashboard, but you don't have digital readouts. So the Rolls-Royce was very much looking to the future in the 80s and has this crazy digital display in the centre console with the outside temperature, what the time is, and your trip mileage. Whereas this has got lovely old analogue dials kind of harking back to the Silver Shadow sort of era. And then there's the ride. So it's definitely smooth, it's definitely quiet, it's definitely cushioned, but not quite on the same level as the Silver Spirit. The Silver Spirit is a little bit roly-poly, to be honest, but the ride quality is just unrivaled. It is so smooth. You feel nothing, you feel none of the bumps. We hit a ramp earlier on in the car where it was going from a newly laid road to a bit they hadn't quite laid yet, and didn't even feel it. In this, it's not so bad, but you definitely feel it. There's definitely a sharpness to the suspension. It's nowhere near as roly-poly, but I wouldn't say it's, you know, sporty. But I guess maybe that comes with the extra weight. So we're dealing with about another 500 kilos in this car compared to the Rolls-Royce. Okay, well, I hope Greg has had time to acquaint himself with the Silver Spirit, because we are now just a few miles away from Dwayne Starman's place up in Market Bosworth. So over to you, Greg. What do you think about the Silver Spirit?
Welcome back, viewers. So before we get to the garage, let me give you some final thoughts on the Rolls. So what have I discovered having done some miles now in the Rolls following the Bentley? You know what, it's a nice place to be. Very similar makeup, very similar DNA. You can see the links between them. Couple of positives the Bentley has over the Rolls. That extra power helps. So going through town traffic, just about there. I have noticed where with the Bentley you can take some gaps on the roundabouts. So, you know, modern day cars have got really peppy little engines in, so they tend to take gaps. So to keep up the traffic, you just need that little bit of up and go. The Bentley has that, this doesn't. It has to be worked hard, and I can admit it's not a car that likes to be worked hard. It's definitely a no sir, this is a Rolls, we don't do stuff hastily. Same can be said on these country roads. We've just got out of the town and we're just on a couple of more 50-mile-an-hour sort of A roads, B roads. Whereas the Bentley goes into the corners a little better, it does roll, but it goes into the better. This Rolls certainly likes to wallow, and you know what, I definitely want to make progress in this, because I think you'd be land yachting sideways around the corners if you're not careful. And any small children in the back would definitely get sick, as the cutlery falls over, of course. If you take it steady though, it is more than comfortable, and it will just get on with life. What do I like about the Rolls-Royce though over the Bentley? The brakes, bizarrely, I think the brakes work better on the Rolls. You don't have to stand on them as hard to get them to bite. And for day to day, it just seems in daily traffic and going with the routine, the brakes are just better set up. I can't put my finger on it, but it just, having jumped from one to the other, it just, brakes better. Another thing that makes it really easy in town driving, the steering is uber light on the Rolls-Royce. Positive for the town, but again, going back to my land yachting comment, not necessarily good for darting around country roads. It makes it a little difficult to sort of not have to put a lot of little inputs in to keep it steady and going in the direction you want it to go. But what have I learnt about both of these cars? You know, they do share a lot of DNA, and as I said earlier in the Bentley video, you could probably swap the badges around. You know, you could put the Spirit of XT and the Flying Spur and swap them around, and you could definitely just see all the S-Steads chassis and the sort of crew Rolls-Royce Bentley DNA. They are so similar in many ways. And you do have to go back to, it was such a good thing that they split eventually, because otherwise we would have lost a very good brand, I think, because they are so close together. We would have lost one of the heritages had somebody not made the decision to split these companies apart. But the thing I have learnt, and that is really nice, is there is a spirit from these cars, be it the Flying Spur or the Ecstasy, and it gets under your skin. And you know what? You just enjoy it. You go with the foibles. They're not modern cars, they're not technologically advanced, but they are comfortable and they just take you to a different place. And you can't put a price on that, sadly. And you can definitely see why many of these cars stay with their owners for 20, 30, 40 years. You know, they buy the car once and they will often be with the family for years. They're a faithful friend. They're expensive to run. They're expensive to repair. However, there's just that DNA, that spirit, that character that just gets into the skin, and generally once you've driven one, you keep sort of wanting to go back to it. Anyway, viewers, hopefully we'll catch up soon once the Rolls-Royce comes back from the garage. Me and John will be going back in the Bentley, so no doubt you'll see a bit more from us in there as we talk over or have some rant about Friday traffic. And I will speak to you soon. Take care.
So we made it to Starman's without any further troubles, so they're going to have a look at the charging issue on the car, get it its MOT and have a quick check over, but she's looking all right. Still beading in the rain, which is quite nice. Shame about the rain. But yeah, that's it. We did it. Woohoo! Now all we've got to do is take the Bentley back. What a terrible shame. We have to drive it again.
Oh, what a shame.
Indeed. Right, let's get to it. So, Greg and I have both driven both cars. So, Greg, which was your favourite?
The Bentley.
Bentley.
Definitely the Bentley.
Why have you chosen the Bentley?
So for me, there was a couple of standout factors. Predominantly the handling. I found the Rolls a bit like a
bit rolly.
A bit rolly, shall we say, like a land yacht, and it made me a little bit sick. Is probably the best way to describe it. And the nice thing with the Bentley is it has a good balance of being able to waft, and you can drive really gently with the Bentley. You can be really gentle with it, but it's got enough get up and go that when you give it a bit of right foot, it goes.
It definitely gets up and go. There's no doubt it's got get up and go.
Yeah. So, John, which one do you prefer?
Well, interestingly, and this isn't planned, I prefer the Rolls-Royce. I'd like... It's just softer. They're both luxury vehicles, and the Rolls-Royce just feels a bit more luxury. While it lacks that oomph to really get motoring, when you're driving it, you don't really feel the need to need oomph. You just want to waft everywhere, and it's effortless in the way it does it. There's no rev counter like you've got in here, because one doesn't need to know what one's engine is doing. You just go, and I think that's the appeal to me.
And interesting, you will see in my comments and reviews of the Rolls,
yeah,
that is one of the things I pulled out about the spirit of a Rolls-Royce. Of, you could be in traffic. I was in traffic when I was driving the Rolls, and you don't get stressed. You just get on with the world,
yeah,
manana, and you just go with the flow.
And that is exactly what I love about the Rolls-Royce. It feels that bit more comforting. I mean, I talked in my video about the seats. These seats that are in the Bentley are delightful, really nice and comfortable, but I feel a little bit like I'm sat on the seat, which isn't a bad thing. But in the Rolls-Royce, I think you feel a bit more like you're sat in the seat.
Yeah.
And the thin rim steering wheel as well is all part of that Rolls-Royce experience. It just feels delicate, it feels expensive, and so you treat it really carefully, and it's got a much more assisted steering, which helps with that wafty, effortless feel.
Which I didn't like, and I think that was part of the wallow. But interestingly, both are very comfortable cars and have compromises in the seats, and it's interesting John's just mentioned it. I have probably just about enough legroom in this car, but I'm a little close to the roof. However, in the Rolls, I wasn't far enough back, but I had a good inch to the roof because you sat slightly lower.
Yeah, I guess that's the sitting in the seat. You sink in a bit lower. So they've both done about 90,000 miles, so there shouldn't be any difference in how the seats are broken in. I think these are just firmer seats, and a slightly more modern car, so it might be that the springs have softened over time in the Rolls-Royce.
I think the big question for me is, if I needed to go do grand cruising and go do some serious miles and go across the continent, I'd take the Bentley. I just think it is the more accomplished car to do big miles, boot full, south of France, across Europe as well.
So what you're saying, Greg, is we should take the Bentley to France?
Yes. Good idea, John.
Interesting. So I've taken the Rolls-Royce to France, and travelling at, the motorway speed there, 130 kilometres an hour, is a bit of a stretch. It feels like you're leaning on it a little bit, whereas I think in this it's pretty much effortless. However, for town work, if you were to go into central London where you're stop-start, you're never really going to do anything more than wafting, let's be honest, I think the Rolls is the right car.
And I think on the motorway point, where this has the firmer suspension and the firmer steering, the heavier steering, it just sits better at that higher speed.
So, conclusion to today's video, if you are doing a trans-Europe cross-country run with people, baggage, luggage, whatever it is you are,
or a long distance trip to Scotland, or just somewhere with a bit of distance,
the Turbo R is the car for you.
Yep.
However, if you are planning on wafting around central London and you want to look cool, Silver Spirit is the car for you.
So if you've enjoyed this video today, don't forget to like,
share
and subscribe.
Thank you for watching. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Home, James. Don't spare the horses. Ah.